The year is 2004. You just got through inhaling Doritos 3Ds. Your favorite band, Linkin Park, hadn't made a cocksuck album yet. You just downloaded their new single on your Fusic flip phone, and it was not yet legal to fulfill your fantasy of spilling your seed on Hillary Duff's face. What I'm saying is your life was an absolute fucking mess. But there was always one silver lining at the end of every day. You could go home to your PlayStation 2 and play your favorite hip-hop wrestling-based fighting game. I'm not talking about backyard wrestling, there goes the neighborhood. We're talking Def Jam Fight for New York. Def Jam Fight for New York is the sequel to Def Jam Vendetta and the predecessor to... If you're wondering why we're only talking about the second installment, it's because Def Jam Fight for New York is the only middle child that's truly loved more than the others. We're skipping over Vendetta because...
It sucks.
Do you care to elaborate?
Not really.
To those who don't know dick about Def Jam, which is who this video is for, it's basically a legal way to knock your favorite rappers the fuck out. Your favorite rappers from 2004 and beforehand, at least. Except for 50 Cent and Eminem or Jay-Z. Alright, listen. Not all of your favorite rappers from 2004, but enough of them, okay? Def Jam Fight for New York features a ton of classic, old-school rappers, such as Danny Trejo, Henry Rollins, and Carmen Electra.
I love hip-hop!
But all jokes aside, just a few of the most famous rappers that show up in this game are Ludacris, Busta Rhymes, that guy who hosted Pimp My Ride, Method Man and Redman from Wu-Tang Clan, and even Snoop Dogg, who plays the villain in this game's story. The previously mentioned Busta Rhymes and Snoop Dogg play actual characters in this game as opposed to playing themselves, which is kind of weird when you think about the fact that you have Snoop Dogg playing Crow and Fat Joe playing Crack and Busta Rhymes playing Magic, but then you also just have Sean Paul and Flavor Flav doing fucking backflips, and they're not any specific character, they're just Sean Paul and Flavor Flav doing fucking backflips. But that right there is the fucking beauty of this game. We'll get back to story in the later part of the video, but for now, let's just focus on the fucking spectacle this game was at the time. You tell me another fucking game where I can Bruce Lee flying kick Ice-T in the fucking mouth with Snoop Dogg. You tell me the fucking game where I can throw titular baby fat clothes designer Kimora Lee Simmons in front of a fucking moving train. It's not gonna happen. Def Jam Fight for New York is truly a once-in-a-lifetime game that you could really only see once. This game is so unique in so many areas that you'll never see a game similar to it. But I'm sucking this game's dick way too early into the video, so let's get down to some explanations on some shit. Let's start with the gameplay. Fight for New York has 5 different fighting styles that each playable character uses. Those 5 fighting styles are street fighting, kickboxing, martial arts, wrestling, and submissions. Now you're probably thinking,
but fucking nigger me up the asshole with a hot rod, nigga.
Only 5 fighting styles? Especially for a game with a roster of at least over 70 characters? To be completely fair, that is a setback of this game that some people do have shared fighting styles. But you don't just choose from just those 5. You could have a combination of up to 3 different fighting styles for each character, making some people unique. For instance, if you're playing someone whose first fighting style is street fighting and second is wrestling, their wrestling moves would be slightly altered from people who are just wrestlers. If you're a fan of games like the EA Sports UFC games where you have hundreds of characters but they all play exactly the same except for the occasional guy that has this fucking move or this guy that doesn't have this move, by comparison, this game is pretty forgivable. Each fighting style has their own unique way of being able to KO the opponent. This is something my friends and family used to always complain about when I was a kid, but this isn't the kind of game where you just punch your opponent until their life bar is down to 0 and they die. The game will not end if you don't know how to fucking knock out your opponent. If you want the ability to knock out your opponent with one single punch, you pick a Street Fighter. If you want to KO your opponent with a grappling move, pick a wrestler. And submission fighters can even make their opponent tap out, which is a completely different way of winning a fight as opposed to KOing them. Kickboxers and martial artists also have their own unique way of knocking people out. If you want to know how, buy the fucking game and play it, dick knows. If you want more than one way to KO your opponent, pick or create a character that has the 2 or 3 fighting styles you want. This game also has a character creation mode. We'll get to that when we get to the story. But you're not limited to just knocking out your opponent in the ways your fighting styles allow you to. There's also a pretty decent amount of environmental attacks. If you manage to grapple your opponent and push him against the wall, he'll just kind of sit there and think about all the things he's done wrong in his life. And during this small window of time that he's just sitting there like a retard, you can get a couple of free hits in, or you can press the grapple button again to get an environmental attack. These can also knock your opponent out if their health is in the red zone. By doing these environmental attacks, or just by beating the shit out of your opponent by normal means, you'll build up your blazing meter. And once that meter is filled, you can activate blazing mode. Your character will have a short orgasm, then after that, you have the ability to use a blazing move, which is yet again another way to knock your opponent out if their health is in the red. Think of these as like your Rayguard in Tekken or your X-Ray move in Mortal Kombat. They're basically your over-the-top super moves, and Jesus Christ, they get fucking ridiculous. You know, let's just go back to this real quick. Tell me another game where I can use a whole ass nigga as a fucking jump rope. You can't.
But wait! There's more!
And you're still not limited to just that, because there are specific stages with specific things that could also end the match. Like a stage where if you beat the shit out of your opponent against the window enough times, you could just fucking throw them through it. Or the aforementioned subway stage where you can just throw your opponent in front of a fucking moving train. Or my personal favorite, the Ring of Fire, where you, get this, fight in a ring of fire. And if your health is in the red and you get pushed into the fire, you fucking die. You could also have what's called a demolition match, where you and your opponent fight side by side of 2 SUVs. And if you do enough environmental attacks on your opponent's SUV, you can completely total the car, winning the match. This mode honestly makes 0 sense, but it's pretty fucking fun. You could even have team matches where it's 2 versus 2, or a free-for-all match where it's 4 fighters all going out at each other. You also have the option to have only 3 fighters fighting each other for some hot threesome action.
You ever had a threesome?
No.
No? Would you like to?
With who?
Me and
Snoop Dogg.
Speaking of terrible segues, let's get into the story. The story picks up directly where Def Jam Vendetta left off. And if you're like me and you haven't played Def Jam Vendetta, you're probably wondering why Buff Uncle Phil is getting arrested right now. I never looked up the story for Vendetta, but I'm assuming that D-Mob, who serves as your gang leader in this game, was the villain of the last game. I assume the protagonist of Vendetta beats D-Mob and ends up getting him arrested. That's where your created character steps in, saving D-Mob from getting arrested by fucking demolition derbying the police car he's in. After this scene plays out, you get to create your own character. The character creator in this game did not age very well. You have to choose your facial features between these drawings, and by the end of it you make a final sketch, and then it'll make a 3D model based on the pieces you picked. And 9 times out of 10, the 3D model is not going to look anything like the drawing. But getting back to the story, D-Mob is forever in your debt, and instead of sucking your dick, he makes you a high-ranking member of his gang. This gang runs certain boroughs of New York by fighting in underground fight clubs and winning matches. Now, if you're thinking that's not how gangs work, that's because that's not how they work. This game's story is really stupid when you think about it. There's no drug dealing, there's no gun violence, and there's really no illegal activity besides these underground fights, which apparently work under some sort of code system where once one gang wins a fight in this borough, they take over that borough. But the leader of the rival gang, Crow, who's played by Snoop Dogg, doesn't like this code system, but for some reason he still follows it. He even uses this system to take over most of the city later in the story. I guess a light spoiler warning for that one, but I'll try my best not to spoil any other key parts of the story. This game's story really boils down to 2 gangs fighting each other quite literally, without guns and without killing each other, but rather fighting each other, and through a UFC ranking system they decide who runs what. There are certain points where shit does hit the fan in a more serious way than just, oh shit, he knocked him the fuck out. But it's all done in the most cliche 2004 way possible. game's not exactly known for its genius writing, even though I do personally enjoy the story. But since I won't be spoiling the story here, let's just move on to some miscellaneous topics. Something I've always appreciated about this game is that if there's a 3D model in the game, it's a playable character. Right down to the stupidest detail, like the guy that cuts your hair in story mode, all the way to the 3D model that was used to represent your character before you created it. It's a game that definitely does a good job not wasting any of its assets, and I think it goes without saying that this game probably has one of the best hip-hop soundtracks of all time in a video game. If you played this game when you were younger, it's definitely a safe bet to say this molded the kind of hip-hop you're into. All in all, this game, no matter if it's through the music, the characters, or the memorable gameplay, it's a game that'll be in my memory for the rest of my life. Like I said in the beginning, it's a truly once-in-a-lifetime kind of game, and I could not recommend it enough. And with that being said, if I had to rate this game, it would be a perfect 0 out of 10. I fucking hate it.